Welcome in, everyone. I am very excited to get started on this. I think this is going to be a really great conversation. We have a lot of awesome people here to talk about this specific topic. Um, but if you are new to the IT Leadership Lab, if you came in from the Ninja One Discord or LinkedIn or anything like that, welcome. This is a community that is dedicated to IT leaders. It is a place for you to share content, learn from your peers, build community, basically get together all of the IT leaders so that they can share from each other's experiences and share what they have learned over time. Because we'll talk about it in a couple weeks, but it can be a very isolating job. It can be kind of feel lonely, and the the goal of the lab is to allow everyone to kind of network with each other and learn from each other. Um, and then also on that note, we host bi-monthly webinars to discuss various IT leadership topics. We bring leaders on within the space that can share their expertise, and you can kind of hear from people that have actually been there and have actually been in the job. So today we will be talking about survival mode planning. And backstage, Brian was saying that he's already had to deal with some survival mode issues this morning. So I think we'll have some good conversations to get started with. But before we get started with those, I'm going to have everybody on the call introduce themselves. I know that they've been on the streams before, but always nice to do an introduction for any kind of fresh faces or new people that might be joining for the first time. So, Kelly, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how long you've been in IT?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Kelly Schrader. I'm currently unemployed, so I can't say my employer at this point. But I've been in IT leadership for about 15 years. Been in IT for 25, 26. So, but mostly in the small to mid-sized business space, education, government, defense, mapping, just all the same stuff mostly.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad that you're here. And yeah, if anybody has any job leads or anything like that, feel free to post them on the job board and send them to Kelly, because Kelly's a has been a really great person to have here in the lab and sharing his expertise. So, want to get him a job ASAP. So, Brian, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your journey in IT?
Sure. I'm Brian Walters. I'm the IT director for Pinnacle Structures. We're a metal building company in Cabot, Arkansas, currently approaching a $100 million company. So we're really continuing to grow. For 13 of those 15 years, I was a solo IT guy. And I've got many survival stories on that. But even having an associate with me now, it poses its own challenges in the survival mode. And then, as we mentioned earlier, I've had a couple moments today that I might share a little bit later.
Yeah, I definitely want to jump into those because I'm sure that a lot of people on here would relate. Um, well, awesome. Thanks for being on. And then Tony, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do within the kind of IT realm?
Sure. Tony Darden. I'm a partner at VCIO Global. We're a fractional CIO organization. Not every business out there feels they need that IT representation in the C-suite, so we help provide that and do a variety of project oversight, and again, just that leadership for organizations that have a gap. I've been in IT for 35 years. I was a developer for the first decade or so. Worked in food service, but I've had chapters with global manufacturers, heavy distribution. So yeah, it's been a long career.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on. I appreciate you taking out the time to jump on these live streams. It really helps. Um, awesome. Well, we can just go ahead and jump into the topic at hand, which is survival mode. A lot of IT is spent putting out fires, and unfortunately, that means that there is a lot of strategic conversations. A lot of that is lost when you're spending all of your time trying to work on the day to day, trying to fight fires, trying to do things that uh, come up randomly as you're trying to get other work done. Um, and yeah, I mean, Brian, I would love for you to start and talk a little bit about what you've had to deal with today, and kind of the impact those have had on your day and how they might have impacted what other projects you had going on.
Right. My main project today was to set up a remote ubiquity system at the CEO's beach house in Florida. He's got a handyman there. He's going to hook up all the equipment and everything. And I was going to adopt everything on this side. And he wanted to start at 6 a.m. Central. So I got up, had my coffee, and waited and waited and waited. And he didn't get started about 7:30 my time. And that was the time I was commuting to the office because an important printer out in the shop had gone down. So I was troubleshooting that. And by the time I got back to my desk, my CEO had sent me a Brian question mark, question mark, question mark email. So I had that right away this morning. So we started the adoption process, and then I had other issues like the cameras down at the CEO's house. So I'm responsible for his house and our company at times. And at time my associate hadn't come in yet, so he wasn't able to help me with some of that. It was 10 o'clock. I was rushing home to get this call because I had a couple scheduled with Brittany this year, and I unfortunately had to cancel. And I was like, I'm not today, not today. Today's the perfect day to talk about survival mode because I'm in that mode today. And I was able to solve that printer right before I got home, and those two cameras came up too. And sat here and logged in, and I'm ready. So I got a degree in theater, so I'm giving you real acting mode today from the method acting point of view today. So yeah, it kind of started that way, and that's not what I had planned today. And that's what we kind of hopefully we can talk about today is survival mode kills your strategic planning. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. How about y'all, Tony and Kelly? Have y'all had to deal with situations like that where it's just things pile up and you're not able to work on those bigger projects?
Uh, I mean, I think that's just IT in general, right?
Yep.
It it feels like the best laid plans always have their curveballs and things that come up. That's just the nature, especially as we increase. So I'll say all companies are a technology company. Now that doesn't mean every issue becomes an IT support issue. Right? I think it's incumbent on all of us to empower the different departments, and they got to take some level of ownership. Um, but I do think, and I know we'll get into this. I think we have to just accept that we're all firefighters on some level, but there's a lot of hours in the day, and you want to meet with purpose and have discipline on how you use that time because not every problem reported is a fire. Now, I would say I chuckled, Brian, when you were talking about the CEO. To me, if the CEO's mouse batteries are dead, that's a fire.
Yes.
And if his child's home printer isn't working, that's a fire.
Mhm.
I mean, they're making big decisions during their day and run the company, so we want to be attentive to that. But yeah,
I, I don't have a lot to add to either what Tony or Brian said. I mean, it's firefighting. it's it's normal. Survival mode doesn't have to be necessarily, but yeah, it especially when you're working with thin margins on staffing, which I don't know any IT team that isn't. Um, you're one dead mouse away from survival mode most days.
Yeah, for sure. Um, it's interesting you mentioned normal because that was one of my questions was, it's normal to be fighting fires, but it maybe isn't as normal to be in survival mode all of the time. What are some signs that you are purely in survival mode and you do not feel prepared for any future planning?
Great question. I think, yeah, again, I think there's two realities we all have to accept being in the professions that we're in, IT related. One, there's always going to be fires to put out, right? And two, there's always going to be a list of 10 things we're doing. And the fallacy is, well, if I just power through this evening and into the weekend, I'll be caught up. You got to get that out of your head. You're never going to be caught up. So it's all about striking finding a way to balance it. Um, I tend to put a lot of time and energy with our clients into their MSP, helping to be that. So you mentioned Kelly, Army of One, and it's It's a lonely island to be on, right?
Yeah.
But I think that island of one can't necessarily be expected to be a security expert, a help desk ticket expert, an ERP expert, right? So I think, assuming budget allows for that, there's a balance to help focus on outside resources to help make that army of one less overbearing. But every company is different. I just,
I think there's also an element in survival mode of recognizing the business rhythms. My last job was working for K-12 set of charter schools, and so that meant August was 100% survival mode, day in day out. But that's not normal. But it's normal for August. We got more tickets in August than the rest of the year combined. And so you can't get anything done. We actually deliberately paused all of our projects. Everything gets shut down. The only thing that happens is support and resolving significant issues. So in a sense, we're in survival mode because there is no time, there is no capacity for any kind of planning or strategic work. But we're doing it on purpose because we know that there isn't any time or capacity for strategic work during that season.
I like how you frame that, because I look at survival mode a little differently in that you don't know what the day is going to bring, but you know it's going to be chaos. You mentioned August, annual event. Like, that's purposeful. You know it's coming. In theory, you can plan ahead for that, right? Because we know August is going to be a mad rush in the K-12 support, charter school support. So it gives you a little bit of heads up. Brian, what do you think?
Yeah. It got me thinking about, what we come in and want to do and what management expects us to do. And a couple of years ago, my boss, who's the vice president next to the CEO, he come to me and he said, okay, on your report, I don't want to know anything that you're doing for the CEO. I just want to know the work stuff. Okay. That takes a lot of my time. I took that off the report. And then he said, I don't want any day-to-day stuff on here. I only want like development projects and just anything that's considered a project. And he wants due dates on them. And if I change that due date, he wants to know why I changed it, So, and I really can't say, hey, I've been working on the CEO's, network remotely all day today. He doesn't want to know that. So that's my challenge too, is that he wants to see those projects done. He wants them done by the day that I think I can get them done. But if I change the date, he's okay. Why did this date change? So, a lot of it is, I stay busy all day long. But from his perception, I'm not getting anything done, if that makes sense.
Yeah, a couple things you mentioned there resonate with me. One is timelines. C-suite brain is usually around a date and when will it be done. Because if you're building an expansion to your warehouse, that's pretty black and white. We have the rafters and we have the supports and the trusses and the shingles, and there's a level of predictability there. When it's systems and how they integrate, that's anything but predictable. So I always go off a rule of doubling, in some cases tripling. If it's supposed to be a 6-month project, I'm not going to say 18 months, but I'm going to say a year. There's an intentional pad to help account for the realities of the day in a life and the firefighting, like you talked about, Brittany. And one of your questions was, what are the signs? Well, I think as IT leaders, looking around you and your team, are they calling off more? Are they not following up? Is it, deadpans or fatigue? Like, you get a pretty quick sense if they're kind of drowning in survival mode, if you will. And I think there's ways to help motivate and get them through that period. But I'm sure that's a thread we're going to get to at some point here.
Yeah, yeah. I it's interesting because I feel like Brian, it sounds like you're being called to do a lot of different things and prioritize everything as a number one thing. And I think that Nate, oh, hey Nate, speaking of Nate, he mentioned that I believe it was in a Spice World talk that not everything can be a top priority. And unfortunately, if like at some point, it's like I only have a certain number of hours in the day. Either I can do this or I can do this, or I can hire some more help. And so I feel like that's like that's a big thread is just like communicating that too it's tough.
Well, and yeah, like Brian, so Brian, you mentioned, sorry, I keep clearing my throat on you.
Right.
The CEO doesn't want the details, doesn't want the minutia, wants the highlight reel, which I think any leader at that level would echo a similar thing. I found, if we're thinking about mitigation and how do we help manage that? I'm a big fan of, old school is you have a whiteboard with cards that you shuffle, but like Microsoft Planner is a tool, or Trello. And so the CEO, when they're pivoting, it's like, okay, so here were the top 3 that we agreed. This is in the now column. Here's what's coming next. You're pulling from what's coming next. But we can focus on 3 things. So you tell me which of these 3 I can move to the next. And, we're going to help satisfy this. Usually at that simple level, something starts to click. Because now if they like, well, I don't care this, I want those 3 things and this thing we're pulling for. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, but usually they can calm down a little bit, because you can't have 5 number ones. That's just not with small teams. It's just not possible.
Yeah.
When everything's a priority, nothing is a priority.
Exactly.
I like it when there's a list of 10, usually you have 10 things that got started. When I have a list of 3, I'm accomplishing 3 things. I like 3 better than 0.
Right. And a quick example, I was off last week, but July 4th, I did go to the CEO's home because he had a couple IP cameras down. And I said, well, the power's probably off. And sure enough, it was tripped on the power strip on the outside camera, brought those 2 cameras up. And then, but later they couldn't reach the DHCP for some reason. So they defaulted. So I had to go out there again and power it off, but he doesn't understand that part of it. He wants more reliable cameras. And I kind of told him, I said, well, the first problem was power. The second one, I couldn't explain to him because he didn't really understand the DHCP part. But so I told him, I said, okay, I'll make these static IP addresses. He didn't respond back, but maybe that'll make it more reliable for him, So sometimes you can't explain the IT part to them.
Well, but that scenario, in talking to a colleague of yours, you can get as detailed as you want, right? So there is that knowing your audience and how do you Dr. Seuss it to the person versus, War and Peace detail. That's always an interesting art form. And I hope that he sees how you're going above and beyond, and that gives you some bandwidth and runway if you need it later.
One thing I decided to do when I got back from vacation was to become more visible. If they only want these certain things done on my report, that's fine. But I want to be more visible, get those victories in. And right before the call today, I think I got 2 victories in. So that was kind of a good thing. So
Yeah.
And for those that have teams, like, everybody's watching you. Your mood carries down. So how you handle that stress and overbearingness and firefighting,
Yep.
Yeah.
that's a challenge.
Yeah, I that's a great segue into the conversation about the team impact, because survival mode, like you said, doesn't just involve you, it involves everybody on your team, and if you're feeling that survival mode, there's a good chance that the rest of your team is too.
Mhm.
So how can it affect your team's morale, and how do you keep your team motivated when the environment is almost entirely reactive?
Um,
Context, it makes a huge difference. Um, I found that people in IT like to know what's going on. I think we're drawn to that connection with everything. As I haven't met too many IT people that are like, no, I don't really want to know what's going on. There are a few, but a vast majority want to know not necessarily all the gossip, but understanding the why behind the what makes a huge difference. So if there's a way to be able to share the context of why we're in survival mode at this time, and here's what I expect to change. This is what's outside of my control. Um, this is who it's depending on, and this is when I'm going to give you an update. Extends the time in which my team can survive in survival mode. Um, that the thing that I talked about earlier with August for my team is that everybody that their first August, I tell them, the end of the day, you're going to want to go home and just stare at a wall because you're going to be so tired. And every one of them's like, oh yeah, sure, whatever. And then in September they're like, this is so true. I just wanted to go home and stare at a wall. And but I could time box the survival mode, and that's not always the case when we're dealing with things outside of our control that we can't create a time box for it. But you know, there's a compromise. An account gets taken and it blasts a bunch of other accounts, and it's all hands on deck. And now everything else that needed to get done is secondary. That's one of those things where we don't know how long it's going to take to clean up all of those devices, all those accounts, work through everything, meet with every single person that clicked on the link and entered their credentials, and work through all the parts. But the team understands the purpose behind the work that we're doing, and that I think does makes a huge difference in building that resilience through the survival. um, it gets more complicated when it's leadership dysfunction, and they're not doing what Tony's suggesting and identifying their top three and going with that. They're going with the well, these 20 things need to be done tomorrow kind of approach to strategic planning. It gets really complicated leading a team through that. At those points, then I have to draw on myself, and I have to be the barrier. I have to be the prioritizer and say, okay, well, leadership said 20 things. I've got enough of a relationship to know from what they've told me in the past that these are the most impactful things. These are the things that they care about. So you guys, yes, there's 20 things. I want you to focus on these three.
Well, in relationship, I'm going to go to trust. I think that's important to have at the leadership level. And I hope you have a seat at the table, because sometimes IT and the value that we all bring will change priorities sometimes. Um, but that transparent community, no one wants to take, I mean, we all have to take orders from someone. But if IT is all about a decisions given to you versus you are part of the conversation, that's a red flag to me. It could be a sense of leadership disruption or their view on your value. But what you can control is the team beneath you. maybe we can't afford to hire a new person to help put out some of the fires, but pretty sure you can afford pizza Fridays. Pretty sure you can afford that we're going to cycle our days and efforts to give these stressed out team members an extra day off during the week and not have to pull it off of their PTO calendar. I think too, always having your teams back in good times and bad helps give a sense of we're all in it together. I think that helps reduce a little bit of stress. And I'm very particular on if my team wants the mechanical keyboard with the brown switches, well, damn it, they're going to get it. If they want a third monitor, they're going to get it. It's those little things. It costs nothing, but to the individual to not get the stock mouse that is company issued, those are the little things that can help weather some storms.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm not even in IT, and getting set up at home that actually feels good. I like typing on my nice keyboard. It definitely feels like I am an important part, that they want to take care of me and make sure that I, you know, have what I need and have what I want to have in my environment. So
I
um,
do think one last comment. I do think AI is an opportunity here too. When I hear about people being overworked, overstressed, I think in the day and age we're in, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity to automate and simplify some of the mundane time burners that we're all faced with. So I think we're in a
yeah,
good moment for that.
yeah. Have y'all? I guess the practitioners, but I guess Tony, you might have some tips too. But what are some of those like mundane tasks that you have been able to automate to maybe get through all of those survival mode tasks, so that you and your team can spend time on things that actually need more of a advanced human touch.
I'll go ahead and first say that we still haven't automated a lot, so that's something I'm still trying to fit into our environment. Most of our software is Excel VBA, so we rely a lot on macros and we rely on still 32-bit Office and things like that. But we're starting to do a lot more automation, at least through some PowerShell. That's helped us quite a bit, and so yeah, that's been one of my goals is to by the end of this year have a lot more of the mundane tasks automated. I think that would totally change the course of survival mode for sure.
We've done with Copilot and Claude Code automating just the help desk function. Ticket comes in, autoresponder goes out. If it's a password reset, it understands what the policy and procedure is and just does it. And if there's a approval from a department head that's needed, it'll issue that out. Like the front line, I don't know if I'm wording it right, or tier one, however you want to call it, level of tickets can be fully automated on some level for keep because those are time burners, right?
Mm-hmm.
In everybody's respective ERP systems, there is some level of support that you give day in and day out, and you can govern it, build it, put an agent against it, so that you're only brought in if something outside of that script surfaces. I feel like anybody who hasn't dipped their toe yet, you're at a minimum. There's a 40% time saving opportunity waiting for you. Just got to figure out what that is.
Yeah, I linked our automation unlocked live stream recap in the chat. So if anybody is looking for some ideas on things that you might be able to automate kind of quickly, and some tools that other people use, that's a great resource. Um, Something that I think has helped my IT team is that there's a lot of like self service actions too. And I think that helps everyone. as someone that doesn't necessarily want to open a ticket and bother the IT team, um, self-service installs and problems that the users can solve themselves can definitely help in minimizing the number of tickets that get submitted, because I didn't need to reach out to IT to install this specific software because they already had it as part of the process. So um, limiting the amount of user tickets and inputs can probably help with that.
I just want to add one more thing about AI is that about 6 months ago, the top leadership, wanted to meet and talk about AI. But they kept saying privacy, 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 privacy. That's all they were concerned about. So we've set up a local language model we call HAL. I had to call it HAL. And it's going slow going. We've been feeding things into it, trying to get input from management, and we reached a point now. It's like we just need to get this out there for people to use and tell us what they want from it. But they're so afraid of privacy. I'm not sure. So I haven't convinced them that this local language model is local. It's private. It's only there's no financial information there. It's just procedures and manuals and things like that. And they wanted it, but it's been a hard sell. And even talking about Copilot, which is built right into Outlook, it's been a struggle, And I've worked AI and Copilot into my daily life now, and the only thing that hits my survival mode is when I run out of tokens for the day, So I even pay for Copilot Pro, and I argue with it. I said, "Hey, wait a minute! I pay for this. Why am I running out?" So we're really trying to get the AI into the workplace. It's just been really slow going.
You remind us, Brian, that we're in the people business. We just happen to do IT, right? And yeah, we see this all the time with the hesitancy and privacy concerns, and Microsoft, ChatGPT, others have invested a lot of money to ensure your data stays your data while getting the benefits of their model. Now, you're not going to break through the cynics. Well, they say it doesn't, but how do you know? But there are some, and usually the way you bust through that is finding some quick, easy wins that doesn't necessarily tie itself to sensitive data. IT policies and procedures are typically universal. Well, having a co-pilot agent as an example where someone can have a conversation with it. So, how long does my password have to be again? Or, hey, I need to change my password. Can you just change it for me and have it propagate throughout the system, and I don't have to go through all this rigmarole? Feels like once they start seeing the benefits, they're going to want more and maybe lower their cynicism guard a little bit too.
Mhm. Kelly, did you have experience with this in your previous roles, in kind of automating some of these tasks and lightening the load?
Yeah, I mean, automation it's kind of a holy grail. The shift left. It's kind of been abandoned a little bit as an approach to work management, but it's still true. Like, it's no longer used as a marketing term, but it's still a reality on the ground for us. Shift the menial work, the stuff that Tony was describing, to the automated systems, so we can do the cool stuff or the hard stuff. I've also found, though, that I've had the most success when I've been able to unleash my team, where I've not had to be the source of all the good ideas. And so, kind of creating gaps in, kind of bring it back to the survival mode, creating gaps in the work of the people who are having to live that day to day, fire to fire to fire to fire, to give them the room to breathe, to say, oh man, if I could just learn a little bit of Python, I could build that script that's going to automate this process for enrolling this. And now the thing about AI is that you don't have to become, a 5-year veteran of Python to be able
Nope.
to build a script that's going to solve that problem for you. One of my guys, the last job, he actually built a web-based system so that we could share with teachers so they could log in, as long as they had a email address in our Azure tenant for that had a certain domain ending, they could log in and they could unlock student accounts, because it's one of our big problems is that students would just log in, log in, log in, log in, log in, and then it gets locked. And so we were able to offload that, shift that to the teachers who are in the room and needed it done right away. And, it might take us 20, 30 minutes to see the ticket respond. It's not hard. But he was able to build a web interface using AI that was able to run that back through our Azure tenant and secure it really well without being a web developer, a Python developer, you know, using his skills and his experience with PowerShell and this stuff, but he was more of a sysadmin rather than a coder. And he was able to bridge that space and his experience with AI.
Yeah, that's AI has been very helpful for development for me. And in fact, you mentioned Python. I finally had to dive into it this past week. Brittany, Jeff Hunter, he gave me a script to help pull some ticket data from the API in Ninja One, and it was working, but it wasn't quite working all the way. And AI goes, "Hey, if we run this through Python, here's a little web-based thing, and I'll automatically report to your CEO automatically." And wow, it did it. I mean, it was just what took me 3 hours. Now it takes me just a couple minutes. Now I run the report through Python, the web interface, send the email to my boss. So that has really taken a lot off of me. So I just had to add that because you mentioned Python a while ago, and it's not that hard if you use AI. It'll help you.
No, and for the stressed out teams, you talked about how you help motivate or break through. That's why I think AI is so pertinent now, because
Mm-hmm.
if you're meeting with purpose, so 40-hour week or 50-hour week, however your week is, if we're purposeful in carving out time, on clock time, for the ideation sessions, for experimentation with AI, for building the automation, I find the best work comes out of those that are pushed to the brink, or just trapped in the mundane, and they see an opportunity to automate, which turns into a more positive customer experience if done right. But rewarding thoughts like that and experiments like that, and again, we gamify it somehow. um, you don't want to be the smartest person in the room, for sure. And yeah, I just think there's really creative ways to help break through some of these lulls that teams can get into.
Mhm. Yeah. So you mentioned setting aside time for the team to discuss these things. How do you kind of protect schedules and protect those days and actually make time for that and make it known to other teams that maybe IT needs a certain amount of time to work on these kinds of planning um, or prep tasks, because automations are great, but they do require preparation ahead of time, and troubleshooting and making sure everything runs correctly. So how do you communicate that need to the rest of the organization, and do you kind of block off calendars or have your team block off their calendars so that they're not pulled into things last minute?
I mean, throw out a couple points there. You know, IT people. I mean, I think I'm saying something that resonates with everybody. We want to help people, right? And if we're doing a good job, people know that, and they'll circumvent the process. Why would I put in a ticket when I can just pick up the phone and call Kelly or call Brian? And we want to help. We appreciate that they have the faith and trust in us that we're going to help. So that's to me is the biggest barrier, is self-regulation. Blocking calendars and your IT leads protecting and preserving that time, is next. Like, it's easy to say, well, I'm just going to block off time and do it, but the leadership has to have your back on that. and they shouldn't call you directly. And if they do, say, well, hey, if you're calling Brian directly, well, Kelly can help you. I'm out of the office today or whatever it is. Like I feel like you can get there, but usually it's the person that is the biggest barrier because they're just reflexively in the weeds, want to help, you know, pick your scenario.
I've also found that um, it helped a lot when I built a culture as a leader in my own right for my team to set an expectation for them to create time, um, and gave them specific directives, because then they had that to lean back on. Hey, I'll help you in 30 minutes. My boss has told me that I have to set aside this time. And so if this isn't an emergency, if no one is actively on fire, I'll help you in a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's made a pretty substantive difference for them in being able to set aside and protect the time. It also helps them to stay focused. Um, you know, the whirlwind is real in IT. There's so much going on, um, and juggling all the responsibilities can take a toll on our ability to prioritize. And so I've had to say, this is what you need to spend this set of time doing. And what I've done is I've not made it this block of time. I've said you have to choose a time. Pick a time in your day, in your organizational rhythms that works for your school. To use my last organization's example, and block that out. Communicate it to your leadership, and tell them that this is an expectation from your direct supervisor that you spend this time studying, learning, working on automations, policies, self-help documents, all those things that get shoved aside. And then during one-on-ones, then I would revisit, focus on those things. Okay, so you told me last week that you were going to work on this policy document, this how do you use GIFs in Teams kind of document that you wanted to share with your teachers. Where are you at? What have you done? And so it sets an expectation, sets a prioritization, and gives them a foundation to stand on with their organization.
Well, a couple themes I heard there was, like the importance of having one-on-ones with your team. That time is treasured. Like, if there's anything you should always make sure there's time for, is one-on-ones with your team. You can reclaim that time and do something else because everybody's busy. But that's such a treasured moment. And I would say every other or every fourth one-on-one should just be about personal shit. Don't talk about work. Let them. That's. I think there's some healthy things that come out of that.
Yeah.
And then like the C-suite, leadership in general just cares that the business is running and they're being served. Who's on call and who's doing what? Those are the weeds. Yeah, the weeds again. They don't care much about the weeds. But so how you manage and enforce and give people that needed downtime or R&D time to work with AI models, super important. The board cares the business is being served. So hopefully you have that flexibility. All the leaders on the call have that flexibility to manage your team accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hopefully so. I definitely think that one-on-ones really help, and each of my one-on-ones and my team meetings, we all talk about things that have nothing to do with work, and I find that that's really helpful too, because I'm not just here to work. I'm not just living to work. I've got other things going on, and it's really nice when a company can see me as a person and not just a person that's here just to do work. So yeah, I think that's really great advice. So let's say someone is able to get some breathing room, isn't just stuck in survival mode. They can focus on a strategic process. what are some of those big strategic processes that make the biggest impact in kind of a small amount of time? If they don't have, they haven't been able to work on anything strategically recently, what are some things aside from maybe automation that they can do to set themselves up for success?
Well, my associate now that I've got, he's really helped me with a lot of the day-to-day stuff, the network stuff. He likes cabling. Um, Not to insult myself, but he's more of a neat freak. I'm more the messy Marvin when it comes to some things, but he's really helped me in that area. But we've reached a point where, okay, day to day is getting better. We got a robust network. Now I need to get you on some development projects. And he's not a developer. I'm still not a developer, but I know enough. And with AI's help, it's really just becoming incredible. I mean, I got so many AI stories I can tell you about development. Um, but I've challenged him recently. I said, okay, we got a couple spreadsheets that are just old. They don't even need to be on a spreadsheet. Let's see if we can make this into a web-based application. And he's been working on that, and he's had a couple successes with that. And I've been really excited that he's done this, and it's kind of given him a sense of purpose now, and kind of getting him out of survival mode. Saying, okay, all I do is cabling, all I do is this. Now he's got something that gives him a more personal thing to do, and um, it's really made things better around work. We've made things a little more web based, and in a way, it's kind of that automation. We're kind of making things a little bit easier, trying to make things, work, work smarter, not harder, basically. So having it on my team has really taken a lot off my plate.
When you when you say strategic initiative, I reflexively tie in a leadership team or a not that departments don't have their own strategic initiatives, but usually those initiatives are tied to the broader company initiatives, right? Um, I don't know if this perfectly answers the question, but I just think of these flags, these yellow and these red flags that can come up. It's 6 months later and there's been no progress. Well, why? That those are the hard conversations. But so to me, when we feel like we're not making progress, we got to be good at delivering bad news quickly. C suites will respect that and appreciate
Yeah.
that. You're not ducking, you're not dodging, you're not sugarcoating. They will smell that out. So
Oh,
be
yeah.
prompt with all news, bad especially, and keeping them CC'd. I think there should always be a cadence. Any project tied to a strategic initiative having the executive sponsor and the CEO in attendance. And if they miss more than one, halting the project. I promise you that that's going to come back to bite you in the ass if they keep missing meetings, because inevitably something goes astray or there's a scope change or amnesia. So that's where we want to be mindful that we're always aligned, and that means being present. And that sometimes is a tough needle to thread. Because they will understand resource. You hope they'll understand resource constraints, and you're demonstrating your ability to focus on the right areas. Back to the delivering the bad news. So just because a project is 6 months late doesn't mean it's a failure if you're communicating right and being very transparent.
Mhm.
I found when there's breathing room, it's a good time to provoke thought. Um, going back to those one-on-ones, what's been frustrating you? It's say in my example, August is crazy, September is cleanup, we're in October.
Mhm.
So what do you think you could do differently? What would have made August and September a little less of pure fire for you? Um, how could you have impacted that differently? And so I found that really it flexes a couple of muscles. One is, oh, I have agency, I have control over these things that that I felt like they were being done to me, but I can actually impact them and I can change how that outcome happens, both for me and for the people that I serve. And the other part is engaging them past the emotions. You know, emotions are a signal of what's going on, and sometimes the frustrations at people and situations just kind of build up, especially if you've been in survival mode for a long period of time. And when you can engage the problem solving, it can sometimes, okay, I can move past my anger and frustration at this person that just make my life frustration for the last 2 months. Um, so it's, okay, let me focus on the problem rather than the person. So the breathing room can it's got there's a lot of value in there that goes beyond just getting stuff done. That you can fit into those spaces. If you can, I found a lot of success in the upfront of that space, grabbing that time and saying, what can we do differently?
I love the happy hour. I love happy hour for interviews, getting to see someone in their, little more relaxed state. But happy hours with a stressed team. Amazing what alcohol does to the nuggets you get, right? Because that's where they feel like the barriers are down. It only takes someone a little bit loose lip to open the floodgates. It's just it gives people a chance to unwind and tell you how they really think, and you're not, in the confines of their office or a meeting room. I'm not saying you do that every day, right? But I do think it doesn't have to be the annual Christmas party to have moments like that. That's a really good internal team building moment.
Yeah, ours is usually the fantasy football draft.
There you go. Love that.
Yeah.
Which we're coming up on.
Yep. Yep.
Thank goodness. Honestly, it's been tough. It's been tough watching everybody watch the World Cup and being like, yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm ready for American football. That's what I.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like soccer. I don't get it.
It's not for me. It's not
Nope.
for me. I've tried, but
Yep.
that's okay. Um, yeah, I could go on a whole other hour of talking about football, but
Yeah.
I will pivot back and be good about not pivoting too much. So, is there a way that you communicate to higher ups? Because I think Brian, you might have touched on this, and I think all of you have. But how do you communicate to higher ups that you need either extra staff or extra time, or not as stringent deadlines? How do you communicate that upward without it sounding like an excuse? Because I think that it can come across that way, even if it is all very valid concerns. How do you manage that kind of communication?
I'm actually still learning. I like to think I'm a great communicator on this, but we are still considered a small business. I mean, and a lot of it is too formal because I spent a lot of times in the corporate world and working for the state, and I tend to approach IT, even though we're a small shop. I've always treated it like an enterprise, and I would say at this point, over 15 years, we are an enterprise, um, but still trying to communicate, what keeps us going and what makes it your work easier that they don't understand and quite know. So I'm still learning ways to communicate that part of my job when my boss only wants to know about development projects, so that's a part I'm really learning. Um, as far as working with the CEO, when I first got hired there 15 years ago, somebody who knew him goes, "Oh, I heard you got hired at Pinnacle." Yeah, I said, "Well," and he said, "Well, he can be a little hard boiled." And he was right on with that comment. But I got a great relationship with him because I don't react to his reactions. And again, I'm in a much different environment probably than a lot of people are. It's like I said, a small business, and there's gossip and there's things that go on. But I just try to be myself, my calm self, and not react to the reaction. That's what I'm doing. I'm still trying to learn how to communicate these projects that I have to move the due dates back on, because a lot of times in a small shop, being real busy, those dates that I set for myself really aren't realistic. But if I set them too far, he's going to say, "Why is this so far out?" You know. So,
Yeah.
but I'm still learning a lot of that, how to communicate effectively to our management, even after 15 years. So,
Find if kind of back to that I mentioned Planner, Microsoft Planner, but it could be Trello or it could be index cards, right? But having the here's what we're working on, and here now you want us to focus on this, which we can do that. We got to move one of these into the future state. Which one? Which one? How can we? I feel like it helps break it down, and it's in their face, and it's not um, helps take the emotion out of it. I also try to avoid acronyms unless they want them. A lot of stuff. The minute that they feel like you're talking over their head, you kind of lose the, you know, like you want them to look at you as a business person, not an IT
mm,
person. Now that puts the onus on all of us, right? To know the business, to understand finance, operations, to challenges we have with on-time delivery. Like these are things that just being well versed as you can, and then keeping the meetings short and crisp. You start going into the weeds, you lose them, and or her, right? So you gotta. It's it can be challenging for some, right? But I've found that to be successful with C-suites.
yeah, you were speaking of acronyms. I had to use DHCP over the weekend. That failed using using that term.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it starts building trust as early as possible, as often as you can. Um, and one of the mistakes that I made early on in my career as a leader was not investing a lot of time and energy in building up relationships with the leadership of the organization, all across the organization.
Mhm.
And it impacted my team because I didn't have the trust to draw on the ability to say, this is what we're doing, this is why that's delayed, and then having them believe me because I hadn't put the time and the energy into really them knowing that I was a trustworthy person and not somebody that's just gonna, make stuff up. And I wasn't playing video games in my office like people think IT people do.
Yeah.
And that that's a huge part of it is, and as a leader, if you're operating at that level in the organization, investing the time at all levels of the organization, building relationships, making connections, building trust. It's worth every bit of energy that you put into it.
And be good at reading the room. When they're checking their phone or their watch or the eyes are glazing over, be aware. Pivot. Stop talking. Two ears, one mouth. I say that a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah. For me, it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of what are you working on? What's interesting in your world? What's
Top of
what's
your
hard
mind. How
about?
can I help? Yeah,
Yeah,
right. Exactly.
exactly.
Awesome. Well, we're coming up on time, and I know Tony got a hard stop. So, yeah, thank you all so much for your time. I really appreciate you jumping on today and sharing all of your information, Julius. I will try to find some open source stuff and put it either in the comments in this recording or in the recap. So, just keep your eyes peeled for that. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks. We're going to go back to our bi weekly cadence and we'll be discussing um, the lonely journey. And we're going to have Bryant back on for that one too. We're going to be talking about what you can do to get past the loneliness that comes with IT leadership and really kind of find your community of folks because it's really important. So,
Great.
but yeah, thank y'all again. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your days to jump on this. And yeah, we'll catch y'all in the next one.